So as Lindy mentioned, I've been in Toastmasters 27 years. I started out in a little club in downtown Bellevue called Golden Bell Toastmasters. That's in Bellevue, Washington. And our club had a habit when a guest came in, one of the Sergeant-at-Arms team members would greet the guest, talk to them for a moment, and then escort them in and sit them next to a seasoned member. So that seasoned member could guide the guest through the meeting, answer their questions. You basically make them feel welcome. Well, I had joined Golden Bell Toastmasters, and it'd been, I think, a year and a half, coming up on 2 years. And the meeting was getting started. And by the way, this meeting is, just in case you're interested, at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. You have to be a special kind of nuts to belong to a Toastmasters club that meets at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. Well, I'm sitting there, and a gentleman walks into the room, and the Sergeant-at-Arms greets him, talking. I'm not paying much attention. I'm sitting there thinking about what the meeting coming on, looking at the agenda and so forth. And suddenly, I noticed the Sergeant-at-Arms is leading him over to me. And he says, "Kyle, this is Dan. He's a guest. Kyle, would you guide Dan through the meeting today?" Now, I said, "Sure, have a seat." Inside, I was going, "Yes, yes. I'm a seasoned member." The Sergeant-at-Arms teams, those people, they see me as a seasoned member. Oh, I am so gonna guide Dan through this meeting. He's gonna love this meeting. Oh, I'm gonna be the perfect host. All of that's going on in my head. I'm excited. I've made it. Well, the Toastmaster for the day is standing up front. He's going to be introduced in a minute. And he's looking at his agenda. He's going speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. And he says out to the group, "Hey, evaluator 2 isn't here. We need somebody to evaluate. Is there anybody here who's willing to evaluate?" And Dan, sitting next to me, raises his hand and goes, "I'll do it." I went, oh, Dan, are you a Toastmaster?" "No." "Have you evaluated before?" "No." The Toastmaster was literally going to kick off the meeting. I had maybe 23 seconds to try to teach Dan how to give an evaluation. 23 seconds or so before this meeting was on. What could I do? Well, the little librarian gerbils in my brain, in a panic, fled off to the far corners. And one of them found a memory of one of my club mentors, Diane Hitzel, and she dragged that little gerbil dragged that memory back into the light. And I went, "Oh, okay, Dan, this is what I want you to do. During the speech, I want you to keep 2 questions in mind. You're going to be evaluating speaker 2. When speaker 2 is speaking, keep these 2 questions in mind, and only these 2 questions. And then when it's time to evaluate, stand up and answer these 2 questions. And the 2 questions are, what is the speaker doing that's working for me? And what could the speaker do differently to make this work better for me?" I said, if you answer those 2 questions, you'll give a good evaluation. Now, Dan did that. He kept those 2 questions in mind, and when his time to evaluate stood up, he answered those 2 questions. He told the speaker what he did that worked for him, what he could have done differently to make it work better. Now, was it a great speech? No. But he delivered value to the speaker, and Dan wasn't humiliated. The meeting was a successful meeting for him. So for me, that was a triumph. Now, before I go any further, I want to make sure you all have a copy of the handout. I know the emails went out to everyone who registered and had an agenda and had a copy of the handout. Hopefully, you've brought up a copy of the handout. Hopefully, you've printed out a copy of the handout. If you have not printed out a copy of the handout, I would recommend you print out page 5 of it now. But I'm going to share my screen. I want to show you, let's see. I'm going to share that. This is what the handout looks like. This is the first page of the handout. It's an 8-page handout. So this is the first page of it. So if you've printed this out, the whole 8 pages, great. Now, let me go here. Move that down. There we go. So I just brought those 2 questions. I just highlighted those 2 questions for you. What is the speaker doing that works for me? What could the speaker do differently to make this work better for me? And as I said, if you answer those 2 questions, you'll give a good evaluation. Now, if that's the only thing you walk away from this presentation with is those 2 questions and an appreciation for them, then that's great. You will get better at evaluating. And if you just develop your understanding of how to answer those 2 questions, you will get better at evaluating. But we'll talk a little bit more about how we can refine this. One of the other things my mentor, Diane Hitzel, taught me was she showed me a T-chart. Now, we would just do this on a piece of paper. Line across the top, line down the middle. She would put a plus and a minus. That's what she did. That was her T-chart. She taught that to me, and I've used a version of that for years. And the plus side is all the things I make notes. Those are the things the speaker is doing that works for me. And the minus side would be the things the speaker is doing that aren't working for me. That's the way I started to learn this. Now, I have since changed my T-chart. On the right-hand side of the page, I now put a delta. Those of you who are mathematically inclined, you know that delta usually represents change. So I put a delta there, and now it's what on the left side, what the speaker's doing that works for me. On the right, what could the speaker do differently? Mentally, that just takes a step out. When I'm actually preparing to speak, I don't have to sit there and think, oh, that's what they did that they didn't like. What could they do differently? It makes me think about suggestions for change. So it's a minor nuance, but it helps me. It helps me. And this is what I do to this day. If I don't actually have one of my evaluation forms, page 5 of your handout, printed out, if I don't have one of those with me, I just do a quick T-chart. Now, okay, I've already mentioned printing out page 5. I want to mention one other thing about the handout. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back and forth between sharing for this, just so you know. I'm not going to have the screen up the whole time. The first 4 pages of your handout are the notes or the material that we're going to cover today. Page 5 and page 6 are 2 sides of the evaluation form that I like to use when I'm evaluating. And I'll hopefully have the time to walk you through how to use that. Page 7 is another evaluation form we'll talk about. And page 8 is a list of resources, including a link to the very document you're looking at. And one of the reasons I include that is I encourage you to print this out and then write all over it and make notes on it. But I've had people go, yeah, but I want a clean copy. I don't want to write on the notes. Well, now you have a link to this handout. You can print it as much as you'd like. So feel free to write all over this. Now, I've given you 2 questions, but how can we go a little deeper? How can we expand our ability to evaluate? Well, how about adding some more questions? And I'm going to share my screen again. So some of the other more basic questions, and I say basic, these are questions that apply to all speakers, whether beginners or advanced. These are questions, and a lot of these things are things we struggle with, especially when we're beginning speakers. Did we control our nervousness? How many of us have seen somebody standing up there holding onto the lectern, and you swear you can hear the lectern hum because they're so nervous? Did the person show passion when they're speaking? It was a revelation to me that I should speak about things I was passionate about as opposed to some other topic that somebody gave me. Because when I started speaking, I was speaking in a corporate world, and all my topics were given to me. Oh, you mean I should look for what I'm passionate about? Okay, that was interesting. Does the speaker make eye contact? And by the way, let me mention this. It is perfectly appropriate to make Zoom-related comments for an evaluation. And this is one of the things that people struggle with in a Zoom environment, making eye contact. Do you feel them making eye contact with you? How is the speaker's voice? Loud enough, soft enough, vocal variety, all those things that we look for. Does the speaker seem knowledgeable, authentic, sincere? Have you seen somebody who comes across as insincere? Have you seen somebody who seems to be just a talking head, and then you're sitting going, I would buy you
on that outfit besides you.
Okay, can we mute that? Thank you. Thank you, John. How is the speech's structure? Now, structure can be a big issue, a big topic for a speech, but let's keep this one simple. Opening, body, close. Did they have a good opening? Did they have a close? You know, were those pieces of that structure obvious, and so forth. The speech, most of us, we may not have manuals. Now we have pathways. The manual is a reference to the legacy system. We now have exercises, pathways, exercises. So does the person meet the objectives of the exercise? Which means, of course, you have to have read the exercise. So hopefully you talked to the speaker in advance and gotten the exercise. And what other goals does the speaker have? Now, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. How do you know what goals, what other goals besides the exercise? How do you know what other goals the speaker might have? And this is not a rhetorical question. I'd like you to unmute, somebody unmute and answer the question.
You ask them.
You ask them. Was that Vicky?
Yes.
Thank you, Vicky. You ask them. You call up or email the speaker in advance of the meeting and you ask them. Now, there's two benefits to this. I like to try to call the speaker. When I'm evaluating, I like to try to contact the speaker either 3 or 4 days in advance by email or the night before by phone and ask them. And when I call the speaker the night before, there's really two benefits. The first is that I get to know what the speaker wants me to look for. And the second is you'd be amazed how many times I've called the speaker the night before the meeting and said, hey, I'm evaluating you tomorrow. And I hear, I'm a speaker? Yeah, you are. Yeah, you're a speaker. They forgot about it. And now they have some warning. So it's worth contacting the person you're going to speak beforehand. Don't assume that just that the exercise material alone is enough. Let's talk about, let's take evaluation and break it down into its components. And I think this is worth doing because one of the things that I think most beginning evaluators struggle with, I know I struggled with this, was I tried to do everything at once. I was, you know, the speaker was speaking and I was trying to do all components of the evaluation at the same time. And when I learned to break it down chronologically, suddenly evaluation worked much better for me. So let's break this down. So the evaluation breaks down into its 3 components. The first component is watching and listening. Then there's planning, then there's delivery. Now, in terms of watching and listening, I mean, you might think, well, duh, yeah, we're going to watch and listen. But actually delaying your thought, deliberately putting off planning the speech till later gives you more attention to put into watching and listening. And it's a little more subtle than that. So for instance, we need to learn to observe the observer. What do I mean by that? It's a very Zen concept. I remember I took a class on meditation in college. And of course, they're trying to teach you to watch your thoughts. Okay. So I'm sitting there in this meditation class, sitting, watching your thoughts, sitting, breathing, 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 breathing. And the thought occurs to me, hey, I'm bored. Now, normally when I get the, hey, I'm bored, I get up and I go find something else to do. I, go to watch TV, go eat something, go find somebody to talk to. I didn't. I sat there and I watched the thought, I'm bored. Then it went by. And a few minutes later, I got another thought, hey, my butt hurts from sitting here in this uncomfortable position. And instead of getting up and walking away, I sat there and I watched it. Now, that taught me two things. One, some of those thoughts that have been driving me really just pass through. And if I don't give them any weight, if I just watch them, they go away. So I don't have to listen to I'm bored or I'm frustrated or my butt hurts or whatever. I can watch that go away. But it taught me to watch myself. Now, I didn't know at the time that this was going to be helpful. But then fast forward a few years, I'm in Toastmasters. I'm in Golden Bell Toastmasters. Now, a gentleman came and joined the club. When I met Bob Oppel, Bob was an experienced Toastmaster. Bob had been in Toastmasters for longer than I'd been alive when I met him. And he'd already made it to the World Championship of Public Speaking twice. He hadn't won, but he'd made it there twice. That was before I met him. He was a good speaker. He was excellent. And I had to evaluate him from time to time. And learning to observe the observer was critical to this. I would watch Bob. Bob had a great story based on his daughter. His daughter had throat cancer, and she had fought it. And he had this story about being a parent and raising his daughters, and finding out that his daughter had throat cancer, and dealing with it and talking with her about it. And through this process, they discovered that he was her hero and she was his hero. And in this speech was a roller coaster of emotion. And it took a lot of effort to keep enough distance from my own feelings to watch how he did the roller coaster, to watch how he took the audience up and he took us down. And whenever he took us down, he then had a laugh to take us back up again. It was beautiful work. It was a beautiful story. It was touching. It was sincere. And it was wonderful to watch it. But you had to keep enough emotional distance to observe the observer, to see what he was doing and to see how he was making me feel. And that's what observing the observer is about. That is a fine art that is linked inexorably to the evaluation process. We need to learn to observe the observer so we can notice how the speaker is impacting us emotionally, how the speaker is impacting us intellectually. We also need to evaluate the speaker at the level they're at. So for instance, I mentioned how experienced a speaker Bob was. I never mentioned eye contact in Bob's speeches. I never talked about vocal variety in Bob's speeches. I didn't have to worry about those things. I had to worry about more advanced things, which we'll talk about in a minute. When I'm evaluating a beginning speaker, I look for nervousness and eye contact and vocal variety and all the things we look for in a beginning speaker. So we have to evaluate the speaker where they're at. And of course, we're also taking notes. Now, I like to use the T-chart. You can use whatever technique you like, but while we're watching and listening, we're taking notes. Now, after watching and listening, we have to plan our talk. So what's our priorities when we're planning our talk? Now, if we were in a big room, I'd just start asking folks, but I'm just going to say it because in the interest of not having chaos on Zoom, our priorities need to be this. Number one is helping the speaker, delivering value to the speaker. That is our mission, to deliver value to the speaker. Number two, to inspire the speaker to come back and do it again. Because we can deliver value to the speaker, but if we deliver value to the speaker in a really harsh, biting way, the speaker may flee and never come back. I don't know if you've ever seen an evaluator who just delivers suggestions for improvement in a rough way. I have. It can be brutal, especially if the speaker is new. Now, I'm a rhino. I have thick skin. I didn't always, but I mean, I have a thick skin because I've been in Toastmasters so long. I want your feedback. Give me your feedback. Give me your big hits for improving the presentation. Give it to me. I want it. You got to be a little gentler with new speakers. So to inspire them to come back. Now, when we're evaluating, it's an opportunity to give a speech with an opening, a body, a close. It's nice to make it a good speech. But that's our third priority. And fourth, if your club does best evaluator ribbons, yeah, that's a distant fourth priority, is qualifying for the best evaluator ribbons. Now, I went one step too far. I'm going to stop sharing this. I am going to ask this question. I'd like somebody to unmute and answer it. Why do evaluators hesitate to give suggestions for improvement to speakers? Why do evaluators hesitate to give suggestions to speakers? David, go ahead.
Well, they might be afraid to hurt their feelings.
Yes, yes. That is the most common answer I get. We're afraid to hurt their feelings. I have heard a slightly different version of that. We're afraid they won't like us. That's a little more self-involved, but it goes along the same lines of we're afraid we'll hurt their feelings. So how do we avoid hurting their feelings? Well, I'll tell you, we can forget about that problem entirely if we use the right structure for our evaluation. And that's at the next part. So we're planning our evaluation. Most of you, I hope, have heard of the sandwich technique. The sandwich technique is typically tell them some positive stuff they did. Tell them some things they did well. Give them a few suggestions for improvement. Tell them some things they did well is the top level. Give them some suggestions for improvement. That's the meat. And then tell them some more things they did well. That's the other slice of bread. That's the sandwich technique. Hopefully your clubs have taught you that. If they haven't, go home and teach your clubs that, because that's at the most basic level, the sandwich technique is about that. Now, I like to use what I call the improved sandwich technique. And I learned this from another mentor of mine, Jerry Weltner. And his improved sandwich technique is, so the opening is, what are the objectives of the exercise? What am I looking for? So the people who are going to listen to the evaluation know what the speaker asked me to look for. And some of this may have been mentioned in the intro. But what are the objectives and some positives? What did the speaker do well? And then a couple of suggestions for improvement, 2, 3. I tend to not go more than 3 because most of the time speakers can't absorb more than 3 comments. I've evaluated people where I could give them a list of 12 suggestions for improvement. Nobody can absorb that and take it home. Give me your top 3 suggestions for improvement. And then this is the neatest part. Jerry would look for, what did the speaker do so well that he learned from them? So think about that. You're evaluating somebody and you're looking for, what did that speaker do so well that you want to emulate them, that you want to do it like they did it. Now, if you're able to find something like that and you give an evaluation where you talk about what they were looking for, what the goals of the exercise were, some positive suggestions for improvement, and then the thing they did so well that you couldn't that you're going to emulate them. Could anybody honestly walk away from that feeling with hurt feelings? I don't think so. I don't think so. Now let's talk. On page 6 is the mind map. On page 6 of your handout is the mind map that I use, and it matches this structure: opening objectives, positive suggestions, positive personal close. That's the end, the positive personal close. So I will make my notes in the T-chart, and then if I have a few seconds before I go up, I will take the things that I liked and map them to the positive, my suggestions for improvement, my top 2 or 3 picks, map them to the suggestions, the positive personal close, I map that there. So that way I have a nice organized talk to when I stand up to give it. Now, I don't always have time to do that. Sometimes my evaluation takes too long and I don't have time to get to my map. But, you know, assuming I do, that's the way I like to organize it. Now let's talk about delivery. And I'm going to stop sharing for this. This is, of course, all in your handout. We have do's and don'ts of delivery. So you're going to stand up, you're going to deliver your evaluation. I gave a talk. I went to college in Massachusetts, and I hiked up Mount Monadnock, which is it's called Mount Monadnock. It's a 2-hour day hike, 2 hours up, 2 hours back. Not much of a hike, not much of a mountain compared to what we have around here, but it's Massachusetts. So I hiked up Mount Monadnock. Now I moved out here, joined Toastmasters, and one day I was giving a talk, and I told the story about hiking up Mount Monadnock and back down again. My evaluator stood up, and he's like, "Well, Kyle, I really liked your speech about hiking up the mountain, and I thought it was really good. But Kyle, the next time I want you to do the speech again, and I want you to give the speech again, and this time I want you to be the mountain." What do you do with that? What do you do with be the mountain? It's a useless it's a useless suggestion. Be the mountain. I'm a big guy, but I'm not a mountain. We have to try to make our suggestions specific and useful. So that's the first thing, is make your suggestions specific and useful. I've heard people say, "I'd like you to improve your vocal variety." Well, what does that mean, improve my vocal variety? What specifically do you want somebody to change? Do you want to be louder or softer, faster or slower, pause less, pause more? What do you want? So we need to be specific. One of the things, have you ever seen an evaluator? Two things that some beginning evaluators do, and I've actually seen a couple of experienced evaluators fall into this. Have you seen an evaluator who stands up and rather than evaluating the speech, they talk about how important evaluation is? You only have 2 to 3 minutes to add value. Don't talk about how important evaluation is. And if you're worried because there are guests here and you want to make sure they know how important evaluation is, then pass a note around to the Toastmaster or the general evaluator and say, "Hey, talk about how important evaluation is." Don't do it during your evaluation. Your job is to deliver value to the speaker. Or the other one is they repeat the speech. "Hey, Bob, you gave that great speech, and first you talked about this, and then you talked about that, and then you talked about this, and then you just told us a story about that." Don't repeat the speech. You're evaluating the speech. We all heard it. If you go to the pathways and you go to level 1, exercise 2, evaluation feedback, and you watch the videos, they have a video there. It's an excellent video. Excuse me. It's an excellent video on how to evaluate, and they give examples of bad evaluating. So you want to avoid words like must, and you need to. You must do this. You need to do that. No, I don't need to do that. I don't, no. What you want to do is you want to make I statements. I think the speech would be better if you did this. I think I would like the speech better if you tried this. You want to make I statements. And most of the time, that pathways exercise suggests you don't even make suggestions, you just give observations. Hey, I noticed that you said a lot of ums and ahs, or you began a lot of sentences with and. So that's just sharing an observation. And that's especially useful for beginning Toastmasters, beginning evaluators. If you don't have enough experience to give a suggestion, at least share the observation. Hey, I noticed you finished your speech and I thought the close seemed short. And I'm not sure what you want us to do. That's a useful observation to the speaker. You may not know how to fix the close. That's okay. We'll get to that in a second. Share your observation. Now, we want to evaluate the speech, not the person. Now, you might be thinking, well, yeah, but in my old home club, there was a guy who was one of the founding members of the club, and I sometimes refer to him as the Cro-Magnon Toastmaster. His favorite speech topics were how to make money, how to date, and politics. And I can tell you his politics and his dating speeches usually got somebody in the club upset. I've seen him giving a talk and watched half the women in the club just sitting there and simmer. And it would be really easy to stand up and evaluate him as a person. We try not to do that. We try to evaluate the speech. Now, it is perfectly appropriate if somebody is giving a speech that is not appropriate for a club, like a political speech or a religious speech, to say that was the wrong speech for this audience. Unless they set it up in their intro and said, hey, I'm practicing this speech because I'm going to be giving it at this real life event in front of this real life audience. And for, let's say it's a religious talk. And for the remainder, for the purposes of this speech, while the speaker is speaking, you're all members of this congregation. Okay. Then we listen to it from that point of view. We evaluate from that point of view. If you set it up right, it can be okay. But we don't evaluate the person, we evaluate the speech. We try not to tell too many stories when we're evaluating. Remember, we only have 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. We don't have time for an evaluator's personal stories, unless you can keep it really short and it makes the point. I remember watching a speaker talk about taking their family to Disneyland, and the evaluator stood up and said, oh yeah, I went to Disneyland when I was 12. That was neat. I remember going on this ride and that ride. And half the evaluation gone with that evaluator's memories of going to Disneyland, time spent not giving the speaker any value. You need to avoid that. I already mentioned picking the top 3 suggestions. We don't want to overload the speaker. We don't want to overload them with positives. It'd be great, but we don't want to overload them with positives, and we don't want to overload them with suggestions. Just pick 2 or 3 of the top things, maybe 4, and give them a list. Now, I mentioned not overloading with positives. We need to make sure we do have the positives. You never want to do a slam. A slam is a speech that's just suggestions for improvement. I mean, if you're working with a sandwich technique and you have no bread, that's a slam. Even if you phrase things positively, hey, it'd be better if you did this, it'd be better if you did this, it'd be better if you did this, it'd be better if you did this. It's still a slam if there's no positives. So we need to remember that. Even if the speech is horrible, and we've all seen somebody stand up and deliver something horrible, they stood up. They had the courage to stand up. Mention the courage to stand up. The fact that they took the time to organize and come in and present is worth mentioning. Now, we don't want to, I'm going to save that. I've already mentioned giving precise feedback. But we don't just want to tell people, because telling somebody, hey, I'd like you to speak more slowly, isn't as effective as demonstrating. I gave a talk at an advanced club I was a member of over in District 2 a number of years ago. And it was a 40-minute workshop that I was practicing. And my friend Walter was evaluating me. And in this club, the evaluator, it was an advanced club, the evaluations were 3 to 5 minutes long. So Walter had 3 to 5 minutes to evaluate me. Now you can't see below my waist, which is too bad, because while I was speaking at this workshop, I was wearing a pair of pants that I bought recently, and they were about 1/2 inch too long. And the heel, the hem of the pants kept getting caught under the heel of my shoe. So I'm giving the talk, and every once in a while, I'm tugging on my pants leg. You see the motion of my arm? Anyway, I'm giving that little tug every once in a while. I'm completely unconscious of it. And I did this for 40 minutes. So about half an hour later, Walter stands up to evaluate me. Walter delivers his entire evaluation of my workshop. The content, how I delivered it, everything else. He delivers it, never said anything about the pants. He never said anything. For the entire 5-minute evaluation, Walter's tugging on his pants. He's talking about everything else, and he just keeps doing this for the whole 5 minutes. There was a lot of laughter at my expense. Do you think I got the point? Do you think the pants got hemmed up? Walter demonstrated what I was doing. Now he then took it the extra step. He exaggerated it. Rather than tugging it once every 10 minutes or so, he was every 5 seconds. So he exaggerated it, but that really helped. Now, I've done the same thing. I remember there was a young lady who came into my club, and her name was Laura. And Laura was motor mouth, very fast talker, very fast talker. And she stood up and delivered her speech. So I was evaluating her. And I stood up and I said, Laura, I really liked your speech. It was really good. And it had so much energy and so good. And there's something I want you to do, though, because it's kind of hard to listen to you like this. So what I want you to do, what I really want you to do is pause and take a breath. And maybe speak a little more slowly, so we have time to listen and take it in. Now, I wouldn't do that for every speaker, but I was really trying to make a point, because other people had told her to slow down, and I think she needed to see it. But I was also going for humor. So exaggeration, demonstrate, is a great way to teach the speaker. Demonstrate the good that they're doing. I really love the way you use gestures, or so demonstrate what they're doing well, but also demonstrate how to improve. Show it to them. Don't tell them you want them to speak more loudly. Show them speaking more loudly. In my notes, not being boring, one of the chief ways to avoid being boring is to exaggerate. Matter of fact, when I'm trying to pick the 1, 2, or 3 things I'm going to mention for suggestions, one of the criteria I use are one of them something I can demonstrate, because that makes the speech less boring and really engages the speaker. We try not to go overtime. I will confess, as my home club has seen me, I will sometimes go overtime in the effort to deliver value to the speaker, and I got to get better at that. I think the last thing I want to mention here is, it is your job, it is our job as the evaluator to deliver value to the speaker, whether or not that value comes from us. Now, what do I mean by that? We need to give the speaker feedback to grow on, but sometimes we can't. Either we're a beginning evaluator and this is an advanced speaker, and we see a problem, but we just have no suggestions for improving it. Or sometimes we don't even see a problem. We're just so awed by the speaker, we have no suggestions for improvement. And even, I'm an advanced evaluator, and I have gotten caught up in some speakers. They're telling a story. It's so involved. I forget to observe the observer. They're just taking me on the roller coaster ride and I'm going. And when the roller coaster ride is done, I'm sitting there going, oh, crap. What am I going to do? When that happens, we still need to deliver suggestions for improvement to the speaker. How do we do that? Well, if you have no suggestions for improvement, somebody else in your room does. So what I like to suggest is either pick a person like, hey, Lindy's the district champion evaluator. I'm going to send a note around to Lindy saying, hey, Lindy, during my evaluation, I'm going to call on you to see if you had any suggestions for Bob. Or if you don't want to do that, you could just stand up in front of the group and say, you know, this is what you did. You know, here's all the things I liked. You know, I have no suggestion for improvement, but I'm sure somebody here does. Does anybody here have a suggestion for how Bob can improve his speech? Somebody will raise their hand. But if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you keep control of the group. Don't let that person who's adding, who's suggesting it, make sure they keep it short. Make sure they don't launch into their own stories. Keep it, you know, you need to keep control of it because it's your evaluation and you still only have 2 to 3 minutes. But that's a key thing, especially for beginners, beginning evaluators. Ask for help if you need to. Now, we've talked about evaluating basics. I mean, I broke the evaluation down in terms of watching and listening, planning, and delivery. And all of that is kind of the basics of evaluating. And we do those in 3 separate stages. So let's talk about, I need to share my screen. Let's talk about evaluating advanced speakers. So we talked about the questions that we can ask. What is the speaker doing that works for me? What could they do differently to make this work better for me? Those can work with an advanced speaker. They can. And we've talked about some of the questions we especially ask about beginning speakers: nervousness, passion, eye contact, voice, those such things. So what are questions, if we know we're dealing with an advanced speaker, what are some of the questions we might want to keep in mind? Well, how did the speaker use props and visuals? Hands, body, and face. Space. Stories, supporting material, humor, interactions with the audience. Now, I don't have any props here, but I've been using visuals off and on. But you notice I turn the slides off, especially when I want to tell stories, because I want you focused on me, not the slides. Hopefully, I'm using my hands, body, and face. Maybe I'm not using my space as well as I could. Have I used any stories? Well, Walter and the pants tugging, that's a story. Did I use stories? Did I include humor? I think maybe I did. Now, hopefully there's more. Supporting material. Stories is by far the most useful supporting material, but historic events, quotes, facts, statistics. I don't have a lot of facts and statistics here, but somebody else's speech might. Interacting with the audience. Now, I'll tell you, that is a challenge. We're going to interact a lot towards the end. I would love to interact more, and I love doing this in an in-room setting where I can interact with the audience more, because for me as a speaker, it makes the whole experience more fun, keeps the audience engaged. Now, here's a couple of powerful questions. Questions we may not ask of a beginning speaker. We might. But we definitely need to ask it for an advanced speaker. How did they make me feel? Did the person make me feel something? And if so, how did they do it? How did the energy level change? I saw a speaker a little while ago, high energy presenter, spoke for 40 minutes. When he started out, everybody was glued to the screen. As he said, high energy presenter. His energy level stayed high through the entire 40 minutes. By the end of the 40 minutes, I looked at the screen and I saw people looking at their phone, somebody was doing something else, somebody's typing. Now, there were people who were engaged and paying attention, but not everybody. I think half the audience had shut down and were off doing something else. Now, it's not that high. My observation here is, it's not that his energy level had gotten lower, it's that it hadn't changed. And what tires out an audience is an unchanging energy level. I've seen low energy speakers present, and they would have the same effect if they spoke for 40 minutes at a low level. What helps people stay engaged is when the energy level goes up, and then it comes down, and then it goes up, and then it comes down. What we want to shoot for as a speaker is creating some of that roller coaster effect that I mentioned with Bob. Now, Bob did it emotionally, and he used humor. Humor helps. Telling stories helps. One of my most common pieces of feedback to speakers is tell more personal stories, because your energy level changes when you start telling those personal stories. And last and most important, this is especially true for an advanced speaker. Did the speaker make the sale? Now, I'm using sales language, fine. When you're going to present to an audience, there's a reason you're presenting. You want the audience to do something differently tomorrow. Unless you're just trying to entertain the audience. And if you're trying to entertain the audience, then the question, did I make the sale, should be, was I entertained? But if they're trying to make a point, then they're trying to change the way we think. They're trying to change what we do tomorrow in some way. And the question is, were they successful? Did they make the sale? If yes, why? If not, that's even more useful. If not, why not? If they didn't make the sale and you can tell them why, then you're giving us some really powerful feedback on how to make this talk better. So did they convince you of their point? Now, I believe, I'm going to check, we are at the point where we should take a break, or almost there. We're a few minutes shy of 7:55 when we take the break. So let's stop. Let me open the floor to a few questions. We'll get another chance at questions later, but we've got 3 minutes before we take the break. Any questions from anyone in the audience?
John, you're in a position. Could you please monitor who might have a question?
Okay, we got
Deanna, your hands up. Deanna, your hand's up. Do you have a question? Anybody else have a question? Tisha.
Yeah, could you maybe just say a little bit more about humor and exaggeration at someone's expense? There was a little discussion about that, and I'm just curious, because if somebody was mocking me in my evaluation, I might feel made fun of, and that wouldn't be encouraging. So maybe you'd say a little more.
Okay, that's an interesting challenge, because I am talking about exaggerating what the speaker's doing and trying to do it in a lighthearted way. In a sense, you could perceive that as mocking. I think how you do it, the spirit in which you do it, may influence how the speaker receives it. For instance, Walter with the pants tugging was certainly making fun of what I did. Now, I had a good relationship with Walter. Walter was my friend. I knew he wasn't criticizing me. When I was exaggerating Laura's speaking, when I was saying I want you to pause and breathe, I was looking right at her. And of course, when I was done, I want you to pause and take a breath and slow down. I'm looking right at her, and I gave her a smile. I'm not doing it now because, but I gave her a smile, hoping that I'm letting her know, at least I hope, that I'm not criticizing her. I could see if I thought a speaker was particularly vulnerable, if they thought that somebody imitating them was mocking them, I might not do that. Most speakers I've met, I think would look at imitation as the highest form of compliment. I'm not sure I've answered your question. Have I?
Yeah, thank you. That clarified.
Okay. It is 7:54. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Lindy, do you want to say anything before
Yeah,
we?
I want to, we had one question from Jim. Why don't you go ahead and take that and then we'll take the break.
Okay, Jim?
My question is about timing. How much time do you devote for the positives and how much time do you devote to the improvements?
Okay, so if you think about it, I talk about objectives. I talk about what did the person do well. Let's assume 2 to 3 suggestions. Let's just assume 3 suggestions. 3 suggestions for improvement, and I look for that powerful personal close if I can. And by the way, if I can't find a powerful personal close, if I can't find something that they did so well that I want to emulate them, I take the best thing they did and I use that at the end. So how do you divide that in time? Objectives I try to cover really quick. You know, you got 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I try to do that in 15 to 20 seconds. Here's the objectives that I was looking for. Positives, a minute. Suggestions for improvement. Most of my time usually ends up being there, especially if it's complex. If I have a single complex piece of advice, I will deliberately give myself more time there, and I'll go faster on the positives to give myself more time to explain something. I've had people when they're trying to do humor and it's almost working. And it's like, well, we could fine tune how to do that better. But that takes a little time to explain. And sometimes, I didn't mention this during the do's and don'ts. If it's really complex, I'll just say, this is too big to talk about during the evaluation. Let's meet afterwards. But anyway, I try to give a little bit more time, maybe a minute and a half to the suggestions, and then the positive personal close, another 15, 20 seconds of that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Lindy?
All right, Kyle, thank you so much. We are going to take a 5-minute break, which I have 7:56, which means we'll come back at 8:01 until. Here we are back for the second half of Kyle's Better Evaluating seminar. And Kyle, while you were away, Roxanne told me how much she needs this and how useful it is and how she looks forward to being able to watch the recording as well. So we are on the edge of our seats, appreciating the value you're offering us. Everyone, please help me welcome back to the stage, Kyle Hall.
Thank you. I am glad to be of service, and we aren't done yet. At the end of the presentation part of this, we are going to have an exercise. You are going to get to evaluate somebody. I'm going to ask for some volunteers. You'll get to stand up. Now, we can't do everybody. We'll maybe have time for 3 or 4 people. So the 3 or 4 bravest people who get their hands up first will get to evaluate. You'll get to give a 2 to 3 minute evaluation. Now, professionally speaking, is an advanced club. They normally do 4 evaluations per person. And I'm not sure whether they're 1 to 2 minute or 2 to 3 minute evaluations, but usually every speaker gets 4. We're not doing that tonight. For our speaker, I'm going to ask each person just to evaluate the whole person, the whole speech, and 2 to 3 minutes. And then we'll give you feedback on your evaluation, immediate feedback on your evaluation. So while members of Pro Speaking are welcome to volunteer for this, I strongly encourage guests, especially people who aren't members of advanced clubs already, try this out, volunteer. But we have to have somebody to evaluate. And the person we're evaluating today is M.E. Bartholomew. Now, I'm not going to read an introduction for her. I'm just going to give you the title of her speech. I'm going to introduce her as if she was doing a contest speech. And, yep, you need to unmute, M.E. Can you hear me, M.E.?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can see the timer. I'm going to be taking off my headset. I will not be able to hear you.
Okay, so when I stop speaking, you'll know that I have introduced you. So M.E. Bartholomew, A Flight into Laughter. A Flight into Laughter, M.E. Bartholomew.
Are you a worrier? Do you worry about whether people are going to like you, whether things will turn out well? Have you ever worried that you're going to do something really stupid? You're going to look like an idiot, and there's not going to be any way to stop it? I have. Does all that worrying help anything? I'm going to let you be the judge of that. I'm at the SeaTac airport. I just bought a ticket on a puddle jumper from Seattle to Tri-Cities, sweltering Tri-Cities, 107 in the shade Tri-Cities. As I walk out to the gate, I look out at the runway, and there's these waves of heat coming up from the pavement, like steam rising from a boiling pot of water. Oh no. Having been the wife of a pilot for 25 years, I knew that these conditions were perfect for turbulence. Oh, I didn't want to get on that plane. My feet are dragging. Oh no. I wasn't afraid of flying. I wasn't afraid of the turbulence. What I was afraid of was embarrassment. You see, I knew that the minute I got into a car or a boat or a carnival ride or a plane that was going to be bouncing all over the place, that laughter would come shooting out of me like the cork out of a champagne bottle, and there would be nothing I could do about it. I just knew I was going to be so embarrassed. I slog onto the plane and trudge down the aisle and look at my ticket. That's my seat? The center of the back row? The tail of the plane? Think about it. The tail of the plane is the worst place to be when there's turbulence. It's like being at the end of Crack the Whip when you were a kid. Oh, geez. I go down to the end. I stash my carry-on. I wedge myself into that seat, and I fasten my seatbelt just like a good girl. And I wait. As I'm waiting, I'm thinking, I'm right here on the center aisle. Everyone's going to be staring back at me and watching me melt down. Oh. Sure enough, we get up into the air, and the first thing we hear is the static coming over the loudspeaker. This is your captain speaking. Welcome to Horizon Flight 99 to Tri-Cities. The flight today will be about a half an hour, but there are terrible winds aloft, and it looks like we're going to be having turbulence for the entire flight. We ask that you remain seated with your seatbelts securely fastened. There will be no beverage service today because the stewardesses will also be seated. Have a great flight. Have a great flight? Good grief. Prior to his message, the atmosphere in the cabin was pleasant. After it, you could just feel the fear permeating the cabin. People were glancing uneasily at their neighbors and tightening their seatbelts. Oh, the first bump comes. Sure enough, people are staring at me. Oh. Over on the left, I hear, ha, 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 ha. Over on the right, I hear, pretty soon, the entire cabin is awash with laughter. Everybody's laughing, including the stewardesses. Oh, no. I certainly didn't. Talk about a flight into laughter. I'm willing to bet that that was the shortest half-hour flight that any of these people had ever experienced. Did the worry help? I'm thinking not. You know, next time I'm tempted to worry, I'm going to say, worry, get thee behind me, and be myself. Kyle.
Thank you, Emmy. So for those of you who are evaluating, hopefully you were listening and watching and maybe making some notes. And, you know, like in a Toastmasters meeting, other things are going to go on while you're planning your evaluation. We're going to do the last section of this talk while you're planning your evaluation. So I hope you'll be able to give it a little bit of an ear. So we've been here for an hour and 11 minutes, not including the break, talking about evaluation. And at this point in this presentation, I usually say, so what do you think the most important role in the club is? And usually somebody would go, well, evaluator. And I go, nope, you're wrong. And people look at me like, what? Now, I'm not doing that today because I can listen to evaluation. I've been told that asking a question and going, nope, you're wrong, is probably not what you want to do with your audience. We've been talking about evaluating and being a speech evaluator. A speech evaluator, in my opinion, is the second most important role in a meeting. But the most important role in the meeting, is the general evaluator. It also is the most overlooked role in the meeting, in my opinion, having visited dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of clubs. Before I'd visited dozens and dozens of clubs before I went up the trio ladder, but you know, visiting just lots and lots of clubs while being club growth director, program quality director, district director. And one of the things I see a lot of is the general evaluator at the end of the meeting stands up and goes, hey, you know, hey, we started on time and we had fun, good meeting. And that's my report, and sits down. The general evaluator is the single most important role in the club, in the meeting. Why? Because the evaluator, the speech evaluator, is delivering value to the speaker, giving the speaker a little bit of information so they can get better. The general evaluator is supposed to be delivering value to everybody else. If you look at page 4 of your handout, the little box that says, who do we evaluate? The general evaluator can evaluate everybody who is not crossed out. So the general evaluator isn't evaluating speaker 1 or speaker 2, or if there's a speaker 3, and just about everybody else, and they're not evaluating the table topic speakers. Everybody else is fair game, everybody. So let's walk through this a little bit. I'm going to share my screen again. So remember, when you're general evaluator, that somebody can still usually only absorb the top 2 or 3 comments. But presiding officer, did they start in time? Did they welcome guests? I mean, you decide who starts your club. Is it the president? Is it the sergeant at arms? Is it somebody else? But did they start on time? Did they welcome guests? Did they introduce the Toastmaster? That means, of course, they had to have thought to ask the Toastmaster for an introduction. And I mean an actual introduction, not just, hey, here's our Toastmaster today, Bob. That's not an intro. The Toastmaster. Are they doing the job the Toastmaster is supposed to do? Are they delivering intros? Well, introduction for table topics master, introduction for the general evaluator. Some clubs the Toastmaster evaluates, some club the Toastmaster introduces the evaluators, some clubs the general evaluator does. Do they keep the meeting running on time? Most important, do they keep the meeting fun and interesting? That's the job of the Toastmasters, to keep the meeting fun and interesting. Did they do that? Do you have suggestions to help them do that? The table topics master. Do you have, what were the questions like? Have you ever seen a table topics master who comes up with questions nobody can get? I have. I have a friend who is into conspiracy theories. They don't believe the conspiracy theories. They just think they're fun. So they kind of collect conspiracy theories. So he decided, hey, I'm going to do a table topics based on conspiracy theories. I'm going to ask a question like, hey, Elena, tell us about the last time the black helicopters hovered above your house. And people were like, what? And he'd have to spend 2 minutes explaining the conspiracy theory so that the person could then answer the table topics. It was a disaster. It was a disaster. So do you have suggestions for how they can do it? How are they selecting participants? I've seen table topics people where they just toss out the question and then say, Jim, you're going to answer that. Or they just wait for volunteers. If you wait for volunteers too long, you get a lot of dead space. Well, here's the most important thing. When you're selecting participants, do you give the guests a chance to participate? Table topics is a one-time a guest of the club gets to participate. Do you give them a chance to do so? Let us say no, but do you give them a chance? The other thing I want to mention is table topics is one of the best times in a club for humor. So depending upon what questions you ask and how you phrase them, you can open the door for humor. You know, tell us about a funny story in your life. There's a perfect opportunity for humor. If your table topics questions are, tell us about the last pet you lost, there's not going to be a lot of humor. The general evaluator evaluates the evaluators. Did they give positive comments? Did they use the sandwich structure? Did they give suggestions for improvement or solicit those suggestions from somebody else? Did they leave the speaker hopefully feeling inspired? Did they have effective delivery? Basically, did they use some of the things we talked about today? So if you take the first section, the first hour of this meeting and use it as a general evaluator, you'll be a much better evaluator of evaluators. Reports. Are they useful? Are they short? Have any of you ever heard a 10-minute general, 10-minute grammarian report? I have. It was horrible. You couldn't get the grammarian to sit down and shut up. It was really painful. Other qualities of the club. Is the club friendly? Does it have that good mix of joviality and formality? What am I talking about there? Let's go back to that advanced club I was a member of over in District 2. Some of you know who Omar Rivas is. Omar Rivas was a member of that club for a while. And he and I used to sit next to each other. And that's a bad idea because Omar and I both tend to clown. And when we're together, we clown off each other. And after one of the meetings was done, one of the members came up and said, "You guys got to stop it." And we're like, what? It's like, yeah, you're funny, but you're disrupting the meeting. You're actually disrupting the speakers. You got to stop it. And we're like, we're sorry. But it was true. When Omar and I sit next to each other, we tend to get a little rambunctious. So we started sitting apart, and we could still have some fun, and the club was still fun, but we didn't go over the top. That was a little bit too much joviality. I've seen the other side where clubs are formal and there's no joy. I've seen clubs where they use Robert's Rules of Order for everything. I mean, not just for the business meeting. They start the meeting and they won't move on. They won't close the meeting at the end without a motion and a second and discussion. You don't have to use Robert's Rules of Order for everything. Save that for your business meeting. We need to get that balance of joviality and formality. And are we friendly? I want to mention this. I was in a discussion. I was the VP of PR trainer on Tuesday night. And one of the observations I shared with the group is the clubs I have seen that grew the most, the clubs I've seen that were struggling with membership and came back and grew their membership to a good size, are clubs that had, they focused mostly on two things. Mostly they focused on camaraderie and good evaluations. And they built their camaraderie and they built great evaluations. And there's some, in my mind, I'm not claiming I understand the relationship, but I think there's a relationship between a club with good camaraderie and strong evaluations and membership growth. And I think it's because the guests walk in and go, wow, I want that. They see the joy and the laughter that comes with camaraderie, and they see speakers growing because they're getting strong evaluations. That's why I joined. That's why I joined my club, because they had that. So I've talked about being a general evaluator, the single most important role in the meeting. If you want to improve the quality of your club's meetings, one of the things you can do is take the general evaluator role seriously. You take it seriously, encourage your members to take it seriously. I've actually started creating a general evaluator evaluation form so you can evaluate the general evaluator. I don't think it's ready for publication yet, but I think it's one of the things we should do. We need a way to poke the general evaluator saying, hey, you're being lazy, do the job. So if you want to improve the quality of your club meeting, take the general evaluator role seriously over and over again. It'll get better. Your evaluators will get better because you're taking the general evaluator role seriously. And if your evaluators are getting better, then your speakers are going to get better. And of course, your Toastmaster will get better and your tabletopists will get better because the general evaluator is taking the role seriously and giving feedback to the club. So we've talked about evaluation, especially the two primary questions. What is the speaker doing that's working for me? What could they do differently to make it work better for me? What are some of the other basic questions we can add to that list? What are some of the advanced questions we can add to that list so we can evaluate an advanced speaker and give them the value that they need? And of course, we broke evaluation down into its components. So that's the watching and listening, the planning, and the delivery. And we did some do's and don'ts about delivery. Hopefully, with all the material we've discussed tonight, you feel inspired and ready to go out and practice better evaluating. Now we have a chance to do that. So we had a speech by Emmy Bartholomew, thank you, Emmy, Flight into Laughter. And I would like to ask for volunteers. I'd like to ask for volunteers to come up and evaluate Emmy. And when you are done evaluating Emmy, we, the group, will then give you some feedback on your evaluation and see if we can come up with some suggestions for improvement for your evaluation. Do I have a volunteer? Currently in gallery view, so, no, there it is, okay. If you are volunteering, I want you to unmute yourself and speak up. How about a member of Pro Speaking volunteer to go first? Deanna, do you want to go? Okay, Deanna wants to go. Okay, so evaluating Emmy Bartholomew, Deanna McEnroy.
Thank you. I can tell you really enjoyed Emmy's speech. Thank you so much for your evaluation, Deanna.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thanks, Deanna.
Okay.
Go ahead and mute yourself again. Thank you, hon.
Okay. I don't have any feedback for Deanna on that. Do we have somebody else who'd like to evaluate?
Hey, I'll go. This is Sai.
Okay, Sei. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Sei, let's hear your evaluation of Emmy Bartholomew.
I really felt today our speaker took us to an interesting world of Twilight Zone, where laughter and turbulence all exist in the same place. Our speaker is a very accomplished storyteller. From the get-go, she talked about her journey to Tri-Cities. There were so many areas where the speaker used her proficiency in speaking. When she observed the heat coming from the tarmac, as she was pushed to the final row in the plane, between the back row, the center row, and the announcing the departure of the flight. She almost took me to an actual flight, which I didn't make for the last year and a half. The speaker then took us through a journey, and I was expecting the speaker, Emmy, is going to embarrass herself laughing aloud, and I'm expecting a totally different story. But there was a twist in the speaker's story. The entire plane started laughing with her, and that was the twist. And that is the area I really loved, the twist, the sudden twist in the speaker's story. In terms of suggestion, the one suggestion I would offer is the ending was a little bit abrupt. Everybody was laughing, and nobody suffered any embarrassment. Maybe prolong that embarrassment a little bit more. Experience how you were feeling, how you were initially feeling when you started laughing. And when you started hearing other speakers laugh, instead of feeling embarrassed, you were feeling overjoyed. That would have been a great addition to the speech. But regardless, your speech worked today because it was a beautiful story. It had sudden twist to it, and it was complemented by beautiful language, visual language, auditory language, and the story itself was so apt for a speech like this. So I really enjoyed your story, and that's exactly I'm going to learn from this speech, how to tell a story beautifully. Back to our master evaluator.
Thank you, Sei.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now, let's give Sei some feedback. I have a couple of comments, but I'd actually like to hear your comments first. So does anybody have a comment? Let's focus on what did Sei do during the evaluation that worked for us? Anybody? Go ahead, David.
Well, he stood up and got a lot of his body into the speech. And so he put his whole self into it, not just from here up, but you can see his emotions and his accentuations into Emmy's speech. Very well done.
Very much so. Any other comments on what Sei did that worked for you? Shanti, I got the impression you had something you wanted to say. Am I wrong? Shake your head no if I was wrong.
I can say something. So I feel like Saeed, you really did a great job of using colorful language to keep us engaged in describing Bartholomew. Like I felt like you were a full participation of her story, and you just took us back there again with the body language, which is really great. And yeah, I really like the language he used to describe her story. It made me re-engage with her story again.
Thank you, Shantia. I want to make the comment that one of the things he pointed out was the twist in the story, and the fact that he noticed the twist. And it's worth pointing out, the story has a twist. And it's one of the things that makes it successful. He had a suggestion for improvement. He really did, and I actually agreed with it. If I were thinking about that, I wanted Emmy to spend a little bit more time on that transition from I'm embarrassed and humiliated to be laughing to wait, everyone's laughing with me, what's going on? And then leading the laughter, becoming the laugh leader of the plane. And I've actually heard another version of the story where people commented at the end that would have been worth including if you had time. So what could Saeed have done differently to make this work better? Deanna? What could Saeed have done differently to make this work better? Deanna, can you type that into the chat? Okay, type that into the chat if you will. And so, Abhijit, what could Saeed have done to make this work better?
He could have made a personal connection with Emmy that would make his evaluation very effective. Like what things he would like to emulate from her.
Okay. Anyone else have a suggestion? Teresa.
Instead of talking around Emmy, he could have talked straight to her, which I think did come up later, but just making the evaluation directly towards Emmy. I love what you say too.
Well, actually, let me take a quick side here and mention one of the questions that often comes up in this workshop is, when you're evaluating, should you speak to the speaker or speak to the whole group? And my answer to that is whatever works for you as the evaluator. If speaking directly to the speaker is what works for you, then do it. If it makes sense for this evaluation, then that's the way to do it. If speaking to the whole group makes sense, then do it. Whatever works for the evaluation, whatever works for you as the evaluator is the right way to do it. I had a couple of comments for Saeed. Now, Saeed, I suspect that your camera is slightly, I suspect your camera is below your screen. And the reason I suspect that is you were looking, when you were giving your evaluation, you were looking above wherever my eyes were. So I think you were looking at the screen and not the camera. And you can tell, in my case, the camera is above my screen. If I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking here. If I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking here. And you can feel the difference of connection when I'm looking at the camera. So I would encourage you to look at the camera. And the other thing is you spent a little bit, 25 seconds, starting to walk through the speech. Hey, you told us this, then you did this, then you did this, then you did this. And you didn't run out of time, so it wasn't a problem. But if you did that too much, you'd start running into time you needed to deliver value to the speaker. Any other comments on what Saeed could have done to make this work even better? Hearing none, can we have another volunteer to evaluate?
I think Jim Wan had his hand up earlier.
Jim did. Jim, did you have a comment or did you want to evaluate?
Evaluate.
Okay, excellent. So go ahead, Jim.
Okay, let me...
Evaluating Emmy Bartholomew, Jim Wan.
Emmy, thank you for that great speech. A flight into laughter. What could be more entertaining than that? And you began with some questions for the audience. And that captivated me so much that I forgot to start taking notes. I liked the similes that you put into the speech. How the waves of heat rose off the ground. And you had like the cork flying off a champagne bottle. So these similes really help make the speech really vivid in my mind. Now, just some of the minor points that I noticed, that your camera angle is coming up from the bottom. but I could still see clearly your facial expressions when you came close and your hand gestures. There was ample room for you to move around. So that was well done. When you had the pilot's voice, that change of accent and the tone is a good start. But I noticed that pilot sounded a bit like a Toastmaster. He was energetic and passionate, and you don't get that on airlines. You're married to a pilot, I think you know what I mean. So deadpan would suit that role even more. And I noticed some opportunities that were missed. For example, even the stewardesses were laughing. Now, why not have the stewardesses also deadpan, you know, put your mask on, put your seatbelts on and all that, so that at the end, when you say, even the stewardesses were laughing, that would have been such a great contrast. Overall, I really enjoyed your speech today. And if you added those points and just take the opportunity to create a power of 3 for the stewardesses, perhaps, and that voice, that deadpan voice, like your husband, I'm sure, that would really lift this flight of laughter into the skies. Back to you, Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Okay, let's do the same exercise for Jim. What did Jim do that made this work well for you, that made this evaluation work well for you?
Jim, I loved your high energy and your specificity. And those are the two things I'm going to say. The specificity, I mean, you were able to take exactly what she said and use it to demonstrate. That's another way of demonstrating, as Kyle was telling us.
Excellent. Other comments? What else did Jim do that worked for you? We got a bunch of people with their cameras off, so I can't see if you're raising your hand. Use the little electronic hand raiser if you want to speak. Thomas, you have to unmute. Unmute, Thomas.
First lesson on Zoom. Thank you. He was sincere. He connected well with the speaker. I think the two of them know each other. That helps. And I think the speaker felt good.
I agree. He did connect with the speaker. And that worked really well. Anyone else want to make a comment? Teresa.
I think Jim, you did a great job of picking up things to suggest and things to compliment that I could relate to really well. When you said it, I thought, yeah, that's a good idea, or that was a good comment. So I think that really was a nice, a really positive thing that I think you were able to do. We could relate to what you were sharing.
One of the things I thought Jim did well, I'm not sure exactly how you communicated it, Jim, but I think while you were giving her suggestions for improvement, I think you communicated that these were minor suggestions. It was not like she needed to rework the whole speech or oh, this would completely rework it. But like making the pilot deadpan, it was a very specific suggestion, but it's a subtlety. And it was well done. And I also appreciated the fact that you cleared your background for when you gave your evaluation. So that worked well. Any suggestions for how Jim could have done this better? What Jim could have done to make this work better? And Deanna wrote, that voice, you're really good with eye contact, Jim, great job. So thank you, Deanna. Any suggestions for how Jim could have done, what he could have done to make this work better? So Jim, I'm going to bring up I have one possible suggestion. You mentioned the camera angle for ME, and I agree with you, the camera angle was from below, but it wasn't clear to me whether that was just an observation or whether you had a suggestion there. If you had a suggestion, you did not explicitly say it. And the reason I mention this is because when Emmy started talking, I was thinking in the back of my head, boy, I wish your camera were higher up so it was, eye level or at least face level with her. And that's what I like when I'm watching a speaker present and they're standing, is camera about face level. So that wasn't clear to me whether that was just an observation or whether you had a suggestion which you did not explicitly say. Any other observations on what Jim could have done to make this evaluation work better?
Kyle, if I
Yes?
may.
Sure.
Jim, I loved it that you pointed out the deadpan voice for the pilot or the deadpan of the stewardesses because they're so formal. But to take that even up a notch further for me, I'd love to hear you demonstrate that deadpan voice that you'd love to hear Emmy emulate when she gives it the next time. We heard her voice that had, what, as you said, the Toastmaster energy, and I love that comparison, by the way, that was excellent. But just that additional demonstration of the deadpan voice. Thank you.
I want to compliment Jim. You know, it's always a good idea, sandwich technique, finish with something positive. Jim, I love the fact that you named it similes. You didn't just say, you didn't just compliment her descriptive language. You said she was using similes, and she was. So you recognized the grammatical instrument, and you knew the name of it, and you used it. That's not necessarily rare, but rarer than it should be in our society. I loved your language. You said she was captivating. And there were some other words which I didn't know, but I noticed the captivating. So you used great language to support her in using great language. That's well done. Now, we have 7 minutes left. So I'm going to give you a choice. If somebody wants to evaluate, we can do another round of evaluate and give the evaluator feedback, or I can answer questions. Which do you prefer? If you have questions, unmute yourself and ask the question. If you would rather volunteer if you want to do evaluation, we need to volunteer right away. So we've talked about evaluating. We've broken it down. We've talked about the structure. I'm not going to review everything we've talked about. If you take away from this, those top 2 questions, what is the speaker doing that works for me? What could the speaker do better? What could the speaker do to make this work better for me? If you take away those 2 questions and work them and develop your understanding of them, develop the art of observing the observer, and if you work the general evaluator role, your skill in evaluating will grow, your clubs will become better, the speakers in your clubs will become better, and your Toastmasters experience will become better. It took me a long time to figure out that if I wanted to become a world-class speaker and if I want to become a great leader, I have to become a great evaluator. I have to. Those things are linked. I hope this session on better evaluating is useful to you and helpful, and I hand control of this back to Lindy.
Thank you, Kyle. Your presence here today has been so appreciated. And I'm trying to do and talk at the same time, which is absolutely a no-no for me. And may I mention that in the chat is a link to a Google survey. It's a feedback form for this workshop. I definitely want your feedback so I can make it better. So please, sometime before, before you go to bed tonight, please click on that and fill it out. That's great. So just to wrap up my portion is to reiterate again, how powerful having good evaluations is in the club. When new people come and visit, when they see good evaluations, it's an enticement to join. And for those who've been around for a long time, as long as they keep feeling they're receiving value, they're going to stay. So evaluations are such a great thing to keep developing. And we're glad that you came today to add to the skills that you already have. With that, I'm going to hand control of the meeting back to our presiding officer, Hazel.
Hello. Well, what did you think? We have time here because nobody stepped up. We have a shy audience here. Would anyone that's visiting like to weigh in and give me some feedback on how you found this presentation in value?
Yes, this is Roxanne. Again, I apologize for not having my camera on. I'm trying to respect my husband here. This has been so wonderful. And obviously I haven't quite gotten it yet because I'm looking at your evaluation and cannot answer the question, how could this workshop be improved? But I can tell you that that way you opened and then brought it right back with the top 2 questions, if I got nothing else out of it, that alone would be awesome. But it is clear that this is not just some material that you read somewhere, passed a test, and have come back to regurgitate. You clearly know it. The feedback you give is so insightful, and it is an area that I am developing. I'm gonna be as good as you one day, and I am looking forward to implementing every little thing here, and I'm creating a check mark in my head right now of how I'm going to be going down the line every time I do an evaluation, and I'm gonna use the tools you gave us. Those PDFs, well, they're electronic, but they're not gonna end up in a drawer. And I thank you.
We thank you so much. Yes, Shantia.
Shantia, hi. Hi, Kyle. Great job. Really wonderful workshop. I've learned so much tonight. So one of the things I think that I definitely struggle with when it comes to evaluating is I do often notice all of the positive things that come through people's speeches, and I'm always blown away how people can come with multiple suggestions and even demonstrations for how people can be corrected. So what's a really good tip for how you catch those things, those little details for like what people can work on?
So the way to get better at evaluating is to evaluate more often. Now here's a trick. If you sign up to evaluate, if you talk to your club's vice president education to sign up to evaluate, even if your club meets weekly, you're only going to be evaluating 3 or 4 times a month, right? Let's assume your club has 3 speeches a meeting, which mine typically does, and we meet every week. So that's 12 speeches a month. And even if I'm aggressive about signing up to evaluate, maybe I'm going to evaluate 3 of them. Well, that doesn't have to be the case. I could evaluate all 12. I just wouldn't be standing up and delivering the evaluation. So you can evaluate every speech you hear and then compare your evaluation with what the evaluator's saying. And you'll start to see, oh, hey, they thought of this, I didn't. Oh, I thought of that and they didn't. Oh, that's an interesting way to look at things. So if you really want to work on becoming the best evaluator, evaluate every speech you hear, whether you are standing up to evaluate or not. I hope that helps.
And those people are always happy to get that feedback, even following the meeting. You could just email it to them. They would love to hear additional feedback because the 2 to 3 minutes that people have for giving evaluations can be brief, compared to what there might be to say, and everyone's perspective is valuable. So it wouldn't be wasted. Anybody else want to weigh in on our?
I think Barbara had a comment.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. Evaluations is something that I want to bring to my club and my district. I have a question for you though, Kyle. With the Pathways evaluation form, how do you give the advice to the evaluators who constantly want to give 5s to people and there's really no room to give them improvement?
So I almost never give a 5. She's talking about the second half of the form. The first half of the form where you type stuff in, that's always what did you do well? What could you work on? What could you really challenge yourself? That works for me. The second half of the form where you're rating people on 1 to 5, unless the speaker is Zig Ziglar, they're not getting a 5 in vocal variety from me. And if you don't know who Zig Ziglar is, he is a former expert professional speaker. The So I'm stingy with ones, two, threes, fours, fives. But if I'm giving somebody a 2 or a 3, I try to give them a comment as to why. You know, I think 2 is evolving and 3 is emerging, or maybe it's the other way around. You know, if I'm giving somebody a 3 on vocal variety, I try to give them a comment on how to improve vocal variety. So I'm often filling out comments in that section, the numerical section, to try to give value. And as a matter of fact, some of those will appear there, and they'll also appear in the text above. Did that help?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your question. So we try to end on time here in respect to everyone's time. I just wanted to comment though, when I asked you all to put your, where you were from and what brought you here. We had people here tonight from Malaysia and India, from Saskatoon, from Alaska, Florida, Idaho, and then the surrounding parts of our Sequim, Bainbridge Island, PA. So it was really delightful. And it's because of Zoom is the reason that we're all able to connect that way. So even though we are out of your neck of the woods, if you guys have a heart and an interest and a longing to learn to do those evaluations and to get more practice, we are open here at Professionally Speaking to have you join us. You can come as many times as you like as a guest, and you can learn by observing, or you can join us as a club, a second club, a third club. We have Abhijit here. I don't know how many clubs he's in, but it's a big number. You have an opportunity from across the globe to strengthen your evaluation skills with us here at Professionally Speaking. So to stay in the loop, we have in the chat our newsletter sign up. Our newsletter will keep you abreast of all of our events and our meetings, what our themes are, what we're promoting. And we would love for you to sign up for that. You could get it in your email. And I think that we also have an evaluation link for Kyle, an evaluation link that Lindy's going to explain. I'm going to pass the thing back to Lindy.
Thank you, Hazel. Even now, you're probably receiving in your email inbox this same link. This is for our club. There is a question about what we might pass on to Kyle for you, but mostly it's to help us as a club determine what subject matter you'd like to see more of, what worked or didn't work for you about this. So that survey link is to help us as a club, and we appreciate you doing that. I was trying to put something in the chat that's not going, just to tell you about what's coming up. We have 2 meetings in the coming month in August. August 5th is our standard layout. We usually have 2 or 3 speakers, and each speaker gets 4 evaluators plus a round robin. So that's a lot of minutes of feedback of value. And you can sign on to that at prospeakerclub.eventbrite.com. And then on August 19th, we have a real treat. We are going to help Darren LaCroix workshop his next speech. He has a book that's about to come out, and he's working on the presentation that's going with that. So he's going to give his 40-minute presentation, and then we, all of us in the audience, are going to have a chance to contribute to the round robin evaluation. And it's always so, it's inspiring to realize that those that we hold up on pedestals sometimes also are doing the same thing that we are doing in terms of repeating speeches, getting feedback, and applying it. So that's what's coming up, and we hope you'll join us. Hazel.
All right, I noticed Thomas said, how can I join your meeting? If you have anyone else here who wants more information on joining the meeting, go ahead and put your email in the chat. We'll save the chat, and we will reach out to you and make sure that you have all the information you need to join us again and often.
Sayi is asking how long your meetings are.
Routinely, the meetings run an hour and a half. Special events like this tend to run 2 hours. Any other questions?
May I make a positive comment about Professionally Speaking?
Yes, please. We would love to hear your comment.
A few years ago, I was working on a TED Talk style speech on how to find and develop humor. And the speech was coming together okay, but I wanted some more places to practice, and I booked myself at several advanced clubs, including Professionally Speaking Toastmasters. And it was at that club I got a key piece of advice that really helped take the speech from what would have been, I think, an average talk about developing humor to a much better speech. And it came from the members of your club.
And I can also say in my pursuit of the world stage in the 2020 and my pursuit of the world stage in 2018, although I didn't get there, that feedback from this club played a major part in my developing my speeches. It's really been of great value to me.
What time do you meet?
We
What
meet
time?
at 7 o'clock Pacific time on the first and usually third Thursdays of the month. And typically we will have 3 speeches and 4 2 to 3 minute evaluations for each speech. So that means that each evaluator is getting, each speaker is getting 12 minutes of evaluation. So someone is going to focus on just the visual presentation, and someone else is going to focus on just the vocal part of their presentation. And someone else will focus on the content they delivered, and someone else will compare it to the manual. Kyle mentioned that, where you check in ahead of time and make sure you understand what the objective of the speech is and whether the speaker met that. So it's very in-depth speeches and evaluations, very in-depth evaluations for each speaker. So it's a wonderful way to grow your speaking skills and grow your evaluation skills. And we invite you to come and check it out on a regular meeting, and you just might want to come and join us. So we are at the top of the hour. Okay, David, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, just in brief, Kyle, thank you for an excellent presentation tonight. You covered evaluations in ways and leaps and bounds that I never even existed. You are excellent at it and well-versed, and you not only educated us, but you entertained us also. Thank you so much.
All right, I don't want to cut anyone off. Is there anyone else who has a comment or a question or anything they'd like to say before we head off? All
I'd just
right.
like to
Well,
say,
go ahead.
I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who evaluated and who had comments for the evaluators, because I know it really helps to make this a stronger workshop for Kyle. And thanks, Kyle, for a great presentation.
All right. Yeah, that was amazing. And I think this is the second time I've heard it, but it was hit home for me much better this time than the first time. So thank you.